Welcome to Product Marketing Alliance. We're home to everything a product marketer needs to learn, share, and succeed in their role. The definitive product marketing course, Product Marketing Core, is the perfect platform for experienced product marketers to broaden their existing knowledge, as well as educate newcomers beginning with their product marketing journey. Our community. We're home to more than 10,000 product marketers across the world, and every single day, tons of product marketing specific conversations go down. The community hasn't just been an absolute wealth of knowledge and answers, it's the place for constant inspiration. With a PMA membership plan, everything a product marketeer could possibly need is all in there, all in one place. Whether you want to grab a template, learn about how to become more strategic from product marketeers who've mastered it, sit back and watch hundreds of hours of presentations from some of the world's most trusted brands, our packages have got it all and more. We really are, dare we say it, the one-stop shop.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. So a couple of years ago, I reached this inflection point in my career. I was doing all these product launches, I was iterating on the process, I was informing all the stakeholders, feeling really good about all this execution work that I was doing. But at the time, I was solely OKR'd on metrics only, not about the strategic value that I was good or actually bringing to the role. So I realized, after writing the 50th launch email, the onboarding email, all of those wonderful tasks that PMMs get assigned, that I was in this vicious execution cycle that I really wanted to pivot my way out of. And so the gap that I saw in the company at the time that I was working at was competitor research. At the time, there was no one looking at it, no one evaluating the broader market. All of the product managers were very much focused on their feature areas. So for me, this is often something that happens at startups when you're running 100 miles an hour. No one's actually looking to see what you could be doing. And then at the time, what most PMMs probably feel on a day-to-day basis, we don't really feel we have a lot of influence over what those product managers are actually putting into the product roadmap. So it should come as no surprise that these are some of the conversations that we typically have, hey, product marketing manager, I need an email. We should create a brochure. We launched a week ago. We should tell the support team. These are all common threads that we hear. PTSD from all of those. And these responsibilities, these conversations make sense because these are the responsibilities that we're often tasked with, right? So, look at what we actually spend doing a majority of our time. And I have quite a cynical opinion on product marketing roles as they're advertised. I think a lot of the time companies kind of overplay the strategic value that they actually want the product marketing manager to have. So if you actually read through a product marketing manager job title, you'll find that it's very much, they have these strategic elements, but it's very much mixed in with heavy execution stuff, which is probably what you're going to be spending 80% of your time doing. And it's also, I find in companies, the OKR structure reinforces this. You're being tasked on metrics, you're being tasked on things like bringing in MQLs or lifting an activation rate. And that just reinforces this kind of perpetual execution cycle that you find yourself in. So if we look at these responsibilities and we look at the cycle as how it's happening, it's no wonder product managers come to us at the end of the cycle and be hey, I need an email, or I need some app store copy or something like that. So, and by doing those tasks really well, which we do because we're great at execution, it's probably why we got into product marketing in the first place, we're reinstilling this narrative that this is what we're here for you. And we in order to shift the narrative, you need to pivot away from that kind of execution. So it makes sense that our days are a manifestation of this. We're very much heavily weighted to the left, and every activity, all of the time that we could be spending on the strategic stuff is usually spent doing the execution that we're tasked with, that we need to just get out the door and ship it. So imagine a world now, if we go back to this cycle, where we've actually broken the cycle, and we're the ones coming to the product management and the product org with the insights that we think they should look at. So they're double clicking on the research areas that you've advised them on. When it's coming around to the stakeholders, you're working with them in sync and pulling in the stakeholders and giving them the guidance that you're advising them on. And then when it comes to creating the go-to-market plan, you're actually doing that together. And I have a great example of this. One of my most recent go-to-market plans, every quarter we sit down with the product manager and we co-create this and actually create the narrative of what story we're going to tell to the market. So when it comes time to this like lovely execution end, which inevitably we have to do, it's like part of our job, it's much easier because we're much more in sync with the product manager like on the way there. So how do we interrupt that cycle? Like if I put it most succinctly, that I guess what I've tried to reinforce throughout my career, it's like not waiting for orders, but just going ahead and showing your value and actually doing the work and bringing the insights to the product org without them asking you. Because often they don't get the chance to kind of breathe and like look at what other opportunities are out there. So how do we do that? Like as a product marketing manager, you have great storytelling skills. You have great like pattern analysis of the data that you're gathering. You know, you're awesome. You're analytical. Like, so how do we put that to use? And that's through like insight-led research and giving that to the product team. And by doing this, like, I promise you, your product managers will start coming to you with a lot deeper questions. The conversations will go more like, hey, like how do we like if I build this feature, how do we differentiate in the market? Like if we go in this direction, is it the same? Is it going to be a copycat as what's already out there? And often, like when I talk to startups, like looking at doing competitor research or people that are looking to hire their first product marketing manager, and they're asking about like how to bring in competitive intelligence like into their role, they're always kind of scared of it. It's like this huge, enormous task that is going to take months and months to do. But like I really encourage people, like you don't have to boil the ocean, especially when you're building demand for it in your company in the initial stages. You just have to start somewhere and be like really scrappy with it. And it's okay to be scrappy. And likely, like you probably don't need to start from scratch anyway. Like here are some of the areas that I've leveraged at Atlassian and in previous roles. So UX research. Designers are some of your best partners if you're like looking for older research. They've often done a lot of interviews. They've done a lot of usability testing that you can leverage. And from usability testing, you can start to get a feel for like where do customers think you suck in? Like where do they think you do really well? And if you're a company like over 10 people, you're probably going to have like 1,000 customer interviews everywhere on like Google Drive, on Confluence, like on everywhere. Like you could just spend like half a day kind of like collating all of this information together, putting it on a spreadsheet and start like identifying some of those patterns in the data if you don't want to start from scratch. And then cancellation feedback. This is actually like one of my favorite areas to look at. I look at this pretty regularly at Atlassian. I think it's got some gold nuggets and it often in companies like kind of collects dust. It just continually runs and no one looks at it. So by taking this approach, like this is your opportunity to distinguish yourself in a company, right? And I think that's been like a common thread in some of the talks today is like how to break out of that cycle and how to be a strategic partner with your product org, which is you know, a work in progress like consistently. So when you are talking to product managers, right, like they are often, if there's put into feature teams, which is how most like product-led organizations are run, they're kind of tasked by their feature area. So they're very deep. They know the architecture. They know the tech stack super well. They know what every customer said about that particular feature, but they just don't have the breadth and the breathing space to actually look at what's going on in the market, which is where you come in. And this is super important competitive intel to go into a product roadmap. It ensures that you're not a copycat or you're not like doing an MVP version of being a copycat, which I have seen. And you're also not missing like an opportunity to to gain market share in a new market, stuff like that. So how do you get there? This is one of the most effective kind of formats that I follow continually. So when you're presenting to the product org, I follow a format of like developing key takeaways right at the start. It's like, this is what I'm going to tell you today. And then developing your insights. So it could be like 3 to 5 insights or 5 to 10 insights that you've pulled out from some of your research. And then product managers love actions. So it's up to you. And I think as product marketing managers, sometimes we can be a little bit timid about putting forth such strong opinions or recommendations. But I would really encourage you to think down and be like, okay, what needs to change in the product if we want to go after this new market? What needs to change in go-to-market? Like, are we doing things correctly? Are we talking to the right audience? Like, this is your opportunity to put forth your opinion to the product org. So I'm going to walk through 3 ways to do that and 3 insights that you can present to your product org. First one. So I love a 2x2 axes. Like, these are kind of one of my favorite ways to represent information. I have a lot of them like filtered over all of my Google Drives. When product managers are tasked by feature, as I mentioned before, like, they don't have the chance to kind of see where you currently sit and then like where you want to play. So having this like framing exercise, doing this framing exercise and then presenting it to your product org, it's saying like, hey, I know where we sit today and I know the path on like how to get there. So how do you get there? One, you can read like a ton of stuff. You've probably already got like a bunch of great competitive intel like filtered everywhere that you can pull together. And then you probably, like, I would encourage you here not to go overboard on this 2x2 axes. Sometimes when you get really deep, like I've created like 10 variations of these and then had to pull back and go, ooh, just need like one representation. So in order to kind of present this to your team, it's really about like you're trying to tell them like 3 areas that you could probably prioritize to your product org. So this is one that I've done in collaboration with a product manager at Atlassian. I sit on a pricing team. So recently we went to market with a premium offering. You can see I've even ditched the 2x2 axes. I just found a simpler way to kind of represent this data. So here in the blue, we're showing where we are today without a premium offering, and then in the green, where we want to play and where we think we could get to with this type of offering. Obviously had to like blur out all the logos and stuff like that. Sorry, guys. So a great insight that I've used before that is really valuable is like the categories that you could be overlapping with in your company. So often companies like don't play in one category or one market. They're overlapping with multiple. So this is a great way to show if your company is in a particularly fragmented market. You could also like move those kind of circles and show like where your weighting is situated at the moment. So you can see here, Steve Blank writes like a really good article on like a new way to look at competitive intel. So there in this example, like he's identified like 5 categories for this particular startup. And if you're in the middle, like it helps you choose which areas that you could compete in. And then you could also see like perhaps there's some functionality missing if there's like a market that you see has a better valuation opportunity or has like a more aligned customer segment. So how do you get there? CEOs love to talk about their market. I read a ton of CEO interviews. It's such a great way to glean information, press releases, what they say about their market. You can start to kind of visualize like where they want to be and what like categories that they're trying to play in. Again, cancellation survey, love those things. So what we do at Atlassian, we have like a question that asks them, are they switching to another product? Not everyone fills it in, that's okay. Any kind of sample size here is good. We start to see some like common threads come through, particularly if you've got a large volume of customers that are showing like your customers are actually evaluating you against a particular competitor or they've switched entirely. And buyer insights, like you're probably already doing a lot of qualitative research, understanding like how they talk about your market and who they're evaluating you against. There's some crucial information here to help you complete a graph like that and present that back to your product org. Value curves. Angela's favorite. She loves to draw these. So a good old value curve. This is such a great visual representation of your competition, and the data points that you're plotting are what your consumers or your customers find the most valuable. So it could be admin experience. It could be low cost. Like the kind of data points that you could put on this is kind of endless. And the reason I titled, I really like to look at this one as to how customers think you're performing, because it's like such an easy thing that you could honestly start in your lunch hour. You could be plotting yourself against some of the competitors because you've probably already got like a really good gut feel. You're talking to customers every day. You are the expert on the product. So here's a complete one. I really like this one. It's airlines. So they've plotted like on the bottom axes, like all of the data points that consumers care about most. So from here, you could see, okay, well, like consumers think we kind of suck at because we don't put like the baggage price in the overall ticket price. So they're getting to the end and the ticket price is like much more expensive. You could also see that customers think your food quality is really poor. So it gives you like those two priorities. You can go in SaaS world, like to your product team and be like, hey, this is where we're continually being marked down on, and this is where I think we should start investing in the next 6 to 12 months. So how you got there? WinLoss Interviews. So WinLoss Interviews I find as a really great source of information as well. I do these on a regular basis, on a monthly basis at Atlassian. I work with the strategy and biz ops person in our product area. We look at like all of the license movements, so people that have upgraded, downgraded, churned, stuff like that. Reach out to them, offer them a gift for their time, ask for 10 minutes. They often want to speak for 45, which is great. You get like really solid information. So you can start like plotting that stuff and start collecting some consistent data there as well. Another great data point is, which you're probably already doing, is like using your competitors' products. Like you'll start to get a really good feel like, ooh, their admin experience is like super nice and their reporting is like super nice and ours kind of lacks a little bit. So you could start plotting those type of data points on your value curve as well. So now you've got 3 tangible nuggets that you could go start your lunch hour tomorrow, whenever. And let's go back to this like cycle slide, right? So here you have 3 insights that you can deliver to your product team and start shifting the conversations and start shifting your own narrative of how you're seen in the company. And because your answers are grounded in all of this amazing research that you've done, your PM and PMM collaboration time, like you're probably having weekly or fortnightly syncs with your product managers, you can start to shift the conversations to be like, hey, these are the trends I'm starting to see. Check back in, like, hey, we talked about those 3 priority areas. Where do you think we could get this on the roadmap? So more importantly, like you've done all of this work, and what often happens with competitive research is that it just dies. You do it on an ad hoc basis and then you kind of never revisit it. So how do you keep it front of mind for your product org? Very good question. So one of the things, these are like 5 kind of tactics that I've tried over my career that have been worked quite well. The first one is research roadshows. It's you are the one that's done the research. Don't just send it out in a Google Drive. Actually book face-to-face time, Zoom calls with people, and start evangelizing your feedback and spread it laterally across the business. So I usually follow an order. I present to the product managers first, then typically like an executive team. At Atlassian in my products area, we often do like joint collaborative PMM research that we present back to the product org as well, which is very cool. So we're kind of selling a consistent message and research story to the product org. And then we had some great insights into the competitive intel kind of roundtable that we had before as well. Often engineering team leads, the engineering org, the product designers get forgotten when you are sending around this research. So I make sure I spend the time and I book in time with the designers. I book in time with the engineering team leads, book in time with the engineers to keep evangelizing the feedback. And sometimes that can be filtered out over a couple of weeks as well. Sales battle cards for objection handling, another great way to filter out your competitive intel for sales teams. And usually they're super hungry for this as well. One thing, I think I heard this before as well, like at Atlassian, we've started to publish like quarterly roundups, which is what we're finding is because often product marketing managers are assigned to like 1 or 2 feature teams, you're having like snippets of competitive intel conversations and never actually bringing it together. So what a roundup does, super simple, we just like post it on Confluence. it just delivers that all in like a nice, neat package that you can kind of deliver it to your product org. And it's a great way, particularly if you're at a really large company. Like I work in a product area that has over 100 people. It's much less of a spread if you're sending out a kind of quarterly roundup or monthly roundup, whatever cadence suits. One other cool thing we do at Atlassian is a PM and PMM sprint. So we probably don't do this as often as we probably should, but it's actually a really great exercise. So we get paired with a product manager counterpart. We each get assigned like a competitor. We spend a couple of days kind of weave it into the week of work. And then at the end of the week, we're all presenting back to each other being like, okay, competitive X has this type of messaging. It looks like they're getting into this market. It looks like, their pricing has changed, things like that. So you're like continually kind of looking at these competitors. And why this is so great working with a product manager counterpart is that they're looking for something totally different to you. So you start to understand like their frame of mind and what they're actually looking for as well. And it's just like a good collaboration exercise, I think. Competitor Slack, super easy, keeps you sane. You can track everything in one place. I did this at my last company. I did this at Atlassian. We created like a competitor channel where anyone can just drop in a competitor, a blog that they've read, a press release that they've seen, so that you're not the only one like trying to find all that information. The more you can kind of get other people to feed into your competitive intel, the better. So this is one of my favorite times as well. Like as much as you need to make it front of mind for your product org, you've got to make the time for yourself as well. So this is a calendar my calendar from last week actually. We work with the San Francisco team. A lot of the marketing org, actually all of the marketing org in San Francisco for Atlassian is based in San Francisco. There's only 3 kind of PMMs based out of the APAC office. So a lot of my mornings are booked up with meetings. So for me, like I'm super protective of my afternoon time. Can't do this all the time, but like every couple of weeks I'm like, right, I'm just going to have an afternoon where I dive deep and I just spend it to, doing research, because that's what brings me joy in my role. But you could be doing, like if you really like storytelling, start to think about ways you can tell your messaging in a different way and just make the time for the things that is going to level up your role and also like bring you more joy. Cool. So it doesn't have to be hard, competitive intel. It can be scrappy. I would encourage you just to get a regular cadence with it. So I've got some resources that helped me as well, and I continually read. You'll find on there I'm a big junkie on Harvard Business Review. They have a lot of practical guidance and tips on strategic thinking and just how to make more, like very practical tips on how to bring that into your everyday. So you can follow that link and have a look, and if you'd like my slides, you can download them as well. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Tania. We've got a couple of good questions actually coming through. First up is, how do you best build rapport and trust with your product org to kind of get yourself at the start of that cycle?
Yeah, it's a super hard question. It depends on for me, I've always found the way I get the most out of work and the way I find the most joy in work is to be friends, which is not always possible with your product org. So it's like getting to know them on a personal level, right? But it's also like, particularly when you start in a company, it's showing value straight away. And sometimes it is a lot of those quick execution tasks. They're often like testing you to see what your stamina is. So if you can get a quick few things out the door, they're like, okay, she knows what she's doing. I'm going to work with her.
Another question here. So what variables do you use on your 2x2 axis for your products, and what works best and resonates most with the product owners?
Yeah, so they seem to love like feature orientated stuff. So I do a lot of it based on like feature kind of categories where customers think we should invest more on. I put that a lot of the time on the 2x2 axes. Something else I do is like company size. My product space is in like an area where, like what most companies do, they kind of start off in the SMB space and then they want to eventually shift into mid-market with kind of that end like visionary goal of going to enterprise. So I do a lot based around like what can we do to kind of get to that mid-market stage as well. But it's honestly like so endless. Like you could put luxury versus budget, like modern versus traditional. It's you start testing, and if your product manager's eyes are kind of glazing over, then you probably got the wrong axes up there.
Another question here. So someone wants to know what startup you worked at before Atlassian, and what are the big differences between, I guess, big and small organizations?
Yeah, so I worked for almost 4 years at a startup called Safety Culture. And then I switched into Atlassian. So the biggest difference that I've noticed is scale. What I did at Safety Culture does not work at Atlassian. So I've had to completely shift my frame of mind and think about things at a much broader scale. Like a lot of the manual work that I probably would have done at my previous startup just wouldn't work at a company of the scale of Atlassian. So it's been a really good exercise to kind of figure out this new world and like how to kind of operate in a more enterprise company.
An audience member wants to know about a bit more about the PMM sprints. Have you run one recently you can expand upon? How did it go?
Yeah, so we start off with the template. So that template generally consists of like what the company is evaluated at, what are their messaging, what are the spaces that they're interested in, what are the industries that they're in. Some of the other things we look at is like a feature grid. And then what kind of recent go-to-market activity that they've done. So at the start of the sprint, we have this template, and then we get assigned our PM buddy, and it's like, okay, go away and kind of see what you can come back with. And you do need a template at the start because that ensures that you're all looking for similar things, so that, you know, one other team is not presenting something that's totally out of whack and like not interesting. But we, just generally run that over a 5-day period. I think it's something we should probably be doing every quarter. We've only done a couple since I've been there, and it's been like pretty ad hoc. But it's also a great way, if you're a new PMM, to come in and to start building that rapport early as well. It's such a great exercise to get to know your PM buddies.
And just one final question, it'll probably get us up to our time. How do you make sure you don't step on the toes of your product managers?
Super hard. It's a great question, and it's such a fragile line that I think PMMs like walk every day. It's like how forceful should you be with your recommendations versus like, I think this would be a great idea. So it's, for me, I don't look at PM relationships holistically. I look at, well, how am I going to work with that individual? Are they a little bit more sensitive to perhaps me being a bit more forceful with my recommendations? Then I need to go about it in a different way. But yeah, it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. And I think naturally, like, the roles have just so much overlap. It's just a super hard kind of space to navigate.
Can everyone give a big round of applause to Tania? Thank you very much.